Guy Baroan. I'd like to talk to you about privacy and data security and some of the new regulations that are coming out today, because I feel like this is very important for you to understand so that you can really protect yourselves and be ready. So it all started a few years ago with the GDPR. The European Union came out with a rule called the GDPR that basically said any business that collects any information about a user, they have to disclose to the user what the information is that they collect, and then how that user can notify them and tell them to remove that information in the event that they didn't want that company to have it. All of this started because many companies were being breached and a lot of data was stolen. And when the data was stolen, it kind of left the citizens, the people, helpless. What do they do now? They had their information stolen. Their social security number was gone, their driver's license, their passwords, their emails. Things on that level were no longer something they had in their possession. It was now stolen, and the bad people were trying to get in and leverage those types of information that was stolen to benefit themselves criminally. So that caused the government to step in Europe and to create the GDPR law. Over the last few years, you probably have seen many new sites create all of those terms, and they give you a pop-up that says, please accept our privacy policy, please understand what we do with your data. All of that came from the GDPR. Any business that has anything to do with a European Union citizen must comply with the GDPR. If they don't, they would be fined heavily. And so many companies in Europe and any business that does any business or has any information on any European Union citizen, whether or not they're in Europe, they have to comply with GDPR. That being the case, California came out with a California Consumer Protection Act, and that went into effect a year ago. And basically that was very similar to the European Union's GDPR rule. And what it basically said was very similar. Any resident within California that had data, or any company that collected data on any resident of California, they must give that information about what they collect to their residents. And in the event that there's any kind of a breach, or there's any kind of information that's collected that the citizen of California would not want to be left with that company, they had to give them a way to have it removed for good. So that was the first rule in California, in the United States, the California Consumer Protection Act, that came out, where it's very similar to the GDPR. Meanwhile, many other states started creating all these privacy laws. And the California Consumer Protection Act, it had a minimum threshold for a business that was $25 million in revenue or more in order for it to be something that they needed to comply with. So while it was the first state to bring in the privacy laws, it was also for larger organizations. Fast forward to 2020, New York introduced the New York Shield Act. The New York Shield Act for New York State is basically the first time that anyone in the state of New York that does business or has any information on any resident of New York must comply very similarly to notify all of the residents of people that live in New York within their organization, whether it's their employees or if it's somebody that they do business with. They need to notify them of the information they collect. They also need to provide them a way to get that information off. And some of the things that changed with the New York Shield Act was they lowered the standards. So the minimum requirement for the New York Shield Act was $3 million worth of business. And some of the information that was considered personal was now an email and a password. But previously, social security numbers, driver's license numbers, credit card numbers were considered something that needed to be reported. The New York Shield Act was the first time that it was now introduced as a lower threshold for the number for the sales that businesses needed to comply with, as well as the information that needed to be protected, and in the event that it got leaked out or stolen, they would have to notify the end user. So this trend that we're seeing is something that is happening all across America, and it's only going to get worse. And so how do you, as a business, function? Number one, you need to protect yourselves from a breach. You need to reduce the risk that you have of being a company that gets breached, and so you have to implement certain services. And on the flip side, if you don't do that to protect yourselves against the bad guys and something does happen, it's a double whammy. Well, now you might have to pay a ransom if you didn't protect yourself. On top of that, you may have fines that you now have to pay to the government. So privacy and data protection is a critical component that every business needs to really consider, whether you're in California or you're in New York or you do business elsewhere in the States. It's only a matter of time before new legislation is going to come out. And the US government is already working on legislation that is going to be nationwide, federally mandated, not state by state. So until that time, every state has its own privacy laws that you must be aware of and should take into consideration. And then there are going to be federal laws that come out in the near term. So you should, as an organization, consider what you need to do to be compliant so that you don't fall on the wrong side of a situation where your data is stolen, and then not only do you have to deal with that, but you also have to deal with fines.